Hello and welcome to Medieval Murder, the podcast that brings all things gruesome and historical to the comfort of your own home or car or wherever it is you're listening from. My name is Hannah Purtymun, and I'm here with my father, Kevin Purtymun, to discuss some of the most famous and infamous murders that took place in the medieval and early modern periods. Medieval Murder came to be first as a blog, then as an Instagram, and now as a podcast after I finished my master's dissertation on homicide in early medieval England. The podcast will feature some of the most famous murders in medieval history, some mini-episode series on different types of medieval murders, and interviews with historians and history enthusiasts alike. Thank you for being patient as we took a break from podcasting due to school and work. The podcast will now be on a more regular schedule for the rest of the summer. So today, we will be returning to Iceland with Egil's Saga.
So I don't know that we're actually returning to Iceland. Maybe by the end of today's story, I'll get you there. But there's some good news and bad news in the whole Egil saga here. We're on episode 5, and doing my research, I look to be about halfway done with Egil saga. So you're going to have to hang in there with me. So let's jump back into Egil saga. If you'll remember where we were at, Egil and his brother Thorwulf had been raiding the Baltic states and had a confrontation off the Danish coast with Egil Braggart. Now, it's not that big a deal, except, if you remember, he is Gunhild's brother, and Gunhild is the Queen of Norway. And already Thorwulf and Egil especially were on bad terms with the King and Queen of Norway, so it's bad for them to be there. Anyway, in this confrontation that he had with Evelyn, he killed a bunch of his men and took a ship. So this made Egil and Thorwulf even less welcome in Norway than the fine line they were walking already. During the time of King Harold the Fair-haired, Alfred the Great ruled England. He was followed on the throne by his son Edward, who passed the throne on to Athelstan. Athelstan had fostered Haakon the Good. But during Alfred the Great's reign, he deprived many of the tributary kings of their rank and power, and turned them into titled earls. They had used to kind of been kings of their own little kingdoms, but Alfred the Great kind of melded them all together and took away some of their power. So that's kind of the background that we got with Athelstan taking the throne. Now, Athelstan, when he takes the throne, he's pretty young for a king. So the earls that had been kings now saw this as an opportunity to challenge Athelstan and get their power and their land and all their other stuff back. These were mainly Welsh, Scots, and Irish. In response to this, Athelstan raised an army and paid anyone to enter his service, both English and foreign alike. So this is kind of the setting that Egil and Thorwulf arrive in England at. So Athelstan's looking for mercenaries. Athelstan's being threatened by the Scots, the Welsh, and some of the Irish. So they kind of come at an opportune time because we know Vikings are opportunists.
All right, yeah.
So Athelstan was a Christian king, and Egil, Thorwulf, and the Vikings were seen as heathens. But if they would take the sign of the cross, this would allow them to mingle with both Christians and heathens alike. So during this time, it was customary for merchants who may have been foreseen as heathens to take the sign of the cross so that they can continue their business with the Christians. So it wasn't uncommon. So knowing this, Egil and Thorwulf took the sign of the cross and entered into service for Athelstan. Northumbria was the most northern part of Athelstan's realm, bordering Scotland. It has a very Nordic influence as it was once ruled by Danish kings. Athelstan had appointed 2 earls of Danish descent, as it gave them standing in the community because they were Danish, and a lot of the people there were Danish too.
Oh, okay.
So these 2 guys were Godric and Alfredgeir. They were to protect Northumbria from raiding and claims of the Scots and Danish incursions. So
okay, so they were kind of defending it from almost their own people?
Well, I think they'd been there long enough where they had assimilated, and it was probably a pretty good deal because now they were earls, and they were collecting the tributes and taking a share in the tributes.
Gotcha.
And then they were also protecting it from any incursions from the Scots.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. So at this time, Scotland was ruled by Olaf the Red. He was the son of a Scottish father and a Danish mother. Olaf the Red raised a large army and began raiding in Northumbria. Godric and Alfred took their men to meet Olaf in battle. Godric was killed, and Alfred continued the fight, but he was routed.
So what is routed?
Routed means you're basically beaten back, and you end up in retreat.
Okay.
It's kind of like you have two choices. You stay and you lose more of your men, and you possibly die yourself, or you take your men from the field of battle and you retreat and you run away. Run away!
Okay.
So Alfred fled with his remaining men to tell Athelstan that Northumbria had fallen to the Scots. Athelstan's not going to be happy at all. Meanwhile, in Wales, Hiring and Aldous, who had been loyal to Alfred the Great and Edward and Athelstan, they had been collecting tributes for Athelstan and kind of running Wales for him. But hearing of Olaf the Red's success in Northumbria, they raised an army and went to join Olaf the Red. So they saw this battle that, Alfred and Godric had lost is kind of weakness in Athelstan. So they decide they're going to go join Olaf the Red, and they head on up to Wales.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or I'm sorry, they head on up to Northumbria from Wales.
Okay.
So when Alfred told Athelstan of the disaster in Northumbria, he was ridiculed and stripped of his title, but retained commanding his men, which kind of seems odd.
That is a little odd. Plus, he also just lost his brother.
True. Well, maybe Athelstan's thinking that maybe Alfred might have a little revenge factor going for him, and he might be a little hardier battler.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. I don't know. So there were some troops that had rallied nearby, and it was decided that Egil and Thorwulf would command the Vikings that had joined Athelstan. It was important for Athelstan's reign that he lead the army into battle. Because he was a young king, he needed to be seen as tough and leading his troops, commanding them, and that he deserved to be king. So the plan was Athelstan to first ride south and then north, adding to his army as he went. So what you got to understand, they didn't have armies at their disposal, kind of like a lot of countries do today. They'd have to go, and these guys may have been farmers, they may have been blacksmiths, they may have been, just people in the communities that would go and, for the money, join the army. I mean, there were a few professional, soldiers, knights that would be involved too. So anyway, Athelstan's got to build an army. He's got Egil and Thorwulf with some Vikings and probably some of Athelstan's knights kind of ready in case anything happens. And now he rides south and starts to build an army. So once he got the army assembled, he was going to ride back north and meet Egil and Thorwulf.
Okay.
At this time, he sent a challenge, Athelstan did, to Olaf the Red to do battle at Wen Heath near Wen Forest in a week's time. So it's called a pitched battle. So what you're saying is it's kind of like a duel, except you're going to use armies. We're going to meet at this date and time. We're going to battle it out, and whoever wins gets the prize. And so they would mark off a section, and that would be their battlefield. And that's where the battle was to take place. So Olaf the Red accepted this challenge. So it was customary at this time, when someone challenged you to a pitched battle, that you stopped all aggression. You didn't do any more raiding. You didn't do any more killing. You just got ready for the battle. So the day before the battle was to take place, Athelstan sent messengers to Olaf the Red with a peace offering. Athelstan said he would give Olaf the Red a silver shilling for every plough in his realm if he would return to Scotland. Discussion amongst Olaf and his leaders was split. Some wanted to take the offer, others thought they should turn it down as possibly Athelstan would offer more. The offer was rejected. The messengers asked for another 3 days before the battle in order to make their return and tell Athelstan what Olaf's reply was, and then discuss if there was another offer. And there was. The messengers returned 3 days later with the same offer, with an additional offer of 1 shilling for every freeborn man, a mark for every leader of 12 men or more, a mark of gold for every captain, and 5 marks of gold for every earl. So there was much discussion amongst Olaf the Red and his earls. Olaf eventually accepted the offer with the stipulation that he keep Northumbria and all the tributes associated with it. Again, the messengers asked for 3 days. They returned and told Athelstan of Olaf the Red's counteroffer. Athelstan made a very quick decision and sent his messengers back with the message that Athelstan would allow Olaf and his men to return to Scotland if they returned all they had plundered since entering Northumbria, and Olaf would be allowed to rule Scotland as long as he pledged allegiance to Athelstan and paid tribute to him. So Athelstan's taking a big turn right here.
Yeah.
I mean, he made some good offers, and now he's like, basically, you know what? You guys just leave me everything you stole, and now you work for me. So
he's kind of angry about it, huh?
Yeah, well, actually, if you remember, he was riding south to raise an army.
Yeah.
So he rode down south. I think he was buying time, because it was a week's time, and then he sent an offer, and he got 3 more days, and then another 3 days, and then another 3 days. So now he's essentially had like 2 weeks to raise an army. So I don't think at the beginning, when he started sending these offers, that Athelstan was ready to do battle.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what he was doing. He was buying himself time. Olaf was awoken by the messengers in the middle of the night with this message. Upon hearing this, Earl Aldous had told Olaf, "I told you this would come to pass. The English are cunning, and while we started this, their king was nowhere near, and now he has time to raise an army to fight us. Earl Aldous and his brother Hiring would prepare his men to attack immediately." So Earl Aldous and Hiring, they set off that night, but were detected by Egil and Thorwulf's men, and trumpets sounded, and they prepared to meet in battle.
Okay.
Thorwulf started moving near the wood. Alfregir went along the riverside. Egil and Thorwulf's men followed their standard carried by Thorfinn the Strong. Seeing that they had lost the element of surprise, Aldous and Hiring split into 2 columns. The column led by Aldous met Alfregir near the riverside and began to push Alfregir's men back. Alfregir and some of his men fled the battlefield. It was said Alfregir knew he would face ridicule and dishonor if he returned to Athelstan again and said he got his ass whipped.
Oh.
So he fled to Wales, eventually returning to his family in France, never to return to England again.
You know, sometimes you just gotta say, you gotta know when to quit.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta know your limitations, and obviously he was not a great fighter.
No, I don't think so.
A great fighter?
I don't think so.
Or a great leader of men.
Yeah.
Might have been more in Godric's wheelhouse, his brother.
Yeah.
So Egil, seeing that this was happening near the river, took some of his men and rallied the remaining Alfregir men to counterstrike, and clearing men in front and to the side of him. So now Egil sees what's happening. He takes charge. He goes down there and he starts whipping ass. He starts leading the men. He's got a sword he calls Adder, right?
Okay.
So I think it was customary to name their swords. So him and Adder start whipping some ass down there. So Egil was leading a much smaller force, but he fought bravely wielding his sword, Adder, striking and clearing men to the front and to the side of him. Thorwolf began fighting furiously, putting his shield on his back, using his spear and sword to fight through men, eventually reaching Hiring's standard bearer, killing him and chopping down the standard.
Ooh.
So this type of battle is kind of where we get like Capture the Flag as a kid. I don't know if you played it. You guys might you might not have done that. That I think like if you took the standard, sometimes that was a sign and people gave up and thought they were defeated. I think.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
So after he took the standard, chopped it down, Thorwolf does single combat with Hiring. He thrust his spear through his chest so far that it comes out.
Through Hiring's chest?
Yep.
Okay.
This is Thorwolf. So it goes all the way through his chest and comes out between his shoulder blades. Then he lifts Hiring off the ground and sticks the spear into the ground. So he's pretty...
So now Hiring is like pinned into the ground.
Yeah, he's pinned into the ground. And I mean...
I'm assuming dead, right?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to survive that. I mean,
yeah, okay.
If you're not dead now, you're going to die. But yeah, I mean, think of the strength that would take to run something all the way through somebody, then lift them out and then stick them in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's a badass.
Yeah, and this is Thorwolf.
Okay, yeah.
So Earl Aldous, seeing that his brother was killed, now throws down his standards and continues to flee into the forest and hide.
Oh, so he's just like, no, I'm out.
Yep.
Okay.
And the remaining attackers fled the battlefield. Egil and Thorwolf returned to the camp to the arrival of Athelstan. See, Athelstan wasn't there yet.
Oh.
Good thing Thorwolf and Egil were there. So Athelstan sets up tents for the night for his army, and they kind of settle in for the evening. At the same time, King Olaf arrives at the opposite end of the battlefield, where his army sets up tents for the night.
And this is Olaf the Red.
Correct.
Okay.
Olaf the Red was told of the deaths of both his earls, Hiring and Aldous. So they thought at the time that both of them had died in battle.
Oh, okay. And Aldous escaped into the woods.
He did. So Athelstan, hearing the details of the battle, pledged his friendship to Thorwolf and Egil. The next morning, Athelstan came up with a plan of battle and placed Egil in charge of a band of Athelstan's finest warriors and wanted them to lead the way. And then he put Thorwolf in charge of a second column of men to be ready to meet the Scots that regroup and try and attack. Egil said that he did not want to be separated from his brother, saying they should both be assigned where the fighting is heaviest and they were needed the most. Thorwolf said they should support the king as he wishes. Egil replied, "We will live to regret this." So the next morning, King Olaf saw Athelstan getting ready for battle. And it was a column led by Olaf that went to attack Thorwolf's group, with another column attacking the group led by Egil.
Okay, so at this point, there's probably, three columns? Or do you think Athelstan's hanging back and doesn't have a column?
I think Athelstan's hanging back right now.
Okay.
So much for leading your army into battle.
Yeah.
So now we've got two columns. We've got Olaf coming towards Thorwolf, and we got somebody else bringing people towards Egil.
Okay, yeah.
So Thorwolf was advancing swiftly on Olaf. So the battle's starting, and all of a sudden, Aldous and his men come out of the forest and attack him from the side or behind.
Ooh, okay. So that's a surprise attack on all accounts, because Olaf doesn't even know he's alive.
Exactly. And they thought that he had just probably run off or gone back to camp. So Thorwolf was advancing swiftly on Olaf when Aldous and his men attacked from the forest where they'd been hiding. So they showed up. I mean, we thought they were gone, but here they are. And they end up, Aldous' men, or Aldous himself, end up killing Thorwolf.
Ooh.
So now Thorwolf's standard starts to retreat. And Egil, seeing this, senses something is wrong. Okay?
He's going to be pissed.
Oh, yeah, he is. So Egil works his way over to where that battle's going on. And Thorwolf's guys tell him what had happened to Thorwolf. So now it is definitely on.
Yeah, Egil's going to get him.
Definitely on. So Egil rallies Thorwolf's men and leads a savage attack, with Thorfinn the Strong carrying the standard behind Egil. Egil engaged in a battle with Aldous, killing Aldous, and then as many of the men that he can catch, he kills.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he's pissed. He's gonna get him.
Oh yeah, and Egil shows no mercy. It's a bloodbath. The Scot.
I mean, as to be expected with Egil.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got that berserker blood in him. So I think you got that going for you also. So the Scots earls, seeing this, fled the field. Egil then redirects Thorwolf's men towards Olaf's column, attacking from the side, inflicting heavy casualties. Now Athelstan sees that Olaf's column is starting to break up a little bit because of the counterattack by Egil. So he moves his standard forward to join in the battle. During the battle, Olaf is killed, and the majority, as are the majority of his men. Those that fled, if they were captured, they were killed. Athelstan was mad, probably to the challenge to his sovereignty, and Egil, he's just pissed,
Yeah, well, and if you piss off Egil, you're gonna lose.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot to piss off Egil. That's
It really
for sure.
doesn't. It really doesn't. I mean, this is an exception to the rule where he's like, this is justified.
Yeah, we've seen him kind of lose his cool about some stuff that maybe he shouldn't have. I don't know.
Yeah.
So after pursuing and killing those that had fled, Egil returned to the battlefield with his band of men. They found Thorwolf's body, so he washed him and dressed the body according to custom. They dug a grave and buried Thorwolf in his full armor and weaponry.
I'm a little surprised they didn't take him home.
I know. Maybe it's just I don't know. I think it would be hard to get a body to Norway, and
Yeah, probably.
I think you need to do something. I mean, you're not going to embalm him or do any of that.
Yeah.
So Egil clasped a gold ring on each of Thorwolf's arms as they covered him with rocks and earth, and Egil spoke a verse. The slayer of the Earl, unfearing, ventured bravely forth. In the thunder god's den, bold-hearted Thorwolf fell. The ground will grow over. My brother near when. Deep as my sorrow is, I must keep to myself. Then he spoke this verse. I piled body mounds west of where the poles marked the battlefield. With black adder I smote Aldous. In a heavy shower of blows, the young Olaf made thunder steel with the English. Hiring entered the weapon fray, and the ravens did not starve.
Oh, yeah, the ravens are eating them.
Yeah. So this, I mean, I don't know if anybody's looked for Thorwolf. I mean, I don't know if it's still named Wenheath in the forest. I don't know if you could mount an expedition to find him. I mean,
I mean, and we're assuming that Thorolf is a real person. Since it's kind of history mixed with fiction.
Correct.
Sagas.
Yeah, I looked up some stuff on Egil, and he supposedly, what I've read is that he lived it like into his 90s.
Oh, whoa.
Which is
right.
which is unheard of. I don't know. I mean, so if he is a real guy,
he survived all his battles.
Oh, spoiler alert! My bad.
You're good.
My bad. So, anyway, Egil and his men returned to Athelstan. Athelstan was having a feast to celebrate the victory. When Athelstan saw Egil, he invited him to his table. Egil was in a solemn mood. He didn't even take off his helmet. I mean, it was customary to kind of, when you went into somewhere like that after a battle, to kind of chill out a little bit. I don't know if they were supposed to check their swords at the door. But anyway, so Egil doesn't want anything to drink. And he's kind of sitting across a fire from Athelstan.
Okay.
And Athelstan being the king, he's a little bit above Egil. So Egil's got his helmet on, and he's got his sword in its sheath in his lap.
Oh, it is in a sheath.
Yeah. And the king's got his sword in a sheath in his lap. And Egil's, he just lost his brother, and we know what kind of guy Egil could be. And so he's kind of unsheathing his sword and putting his sword back, and he's playing with his sword.
Yeah.
So Athelstan sees this, and he unsheathes his sword and puts a big gold ring across the tip of his sword and kind of slides it down. Then he walks towards Egil and puts the sword tip over the fire. To this, Egil unsheathes his sword and puts his sword tip to Athelstan's, and Athelstan slides the gold ring down onto Egil's sword. With this, Egil takes the gold ring, puts it on his arm, sheathes his sword, and takes his helmet off. So now...
So they kind of unspokenly fixed this issue.
Correct. And so now Egil starts to partake in the feast. Maybe not as heartily as he would if his brother hasn't died, but he starts to do a little drinking and cheers up a little bit.
Okay.
So as the evening's going, Athelstan calls to his men, and they bring out, the men have to carry these two huge chests of silver out, and he presents them to Egil. And he tells Egil, one of the chests is for your father, for compensation for Thorwulf. So if you return to Iceland, take him this chest and, let him know, what an honorable person Thorwulf was. The other chest is for you in compensation for your brother, and, it's for you to do with what you see fit. He also at this time asks Egil to stay with him. And he wants Egil, he sees Egil as a valuable member of his entourage, and he wants Egil to stay. So Egil stays the winter with Athelstan.
Okay.
So him and his men stay with Athelstan for the winter. So in the spring, Egil tells Athelstan that he's going to return to Norway. To this, Athelstan offers him land, money, whatever he wants if he would stay.
Yeah.
Egil says, I really need to go back to Norway and tell Thorwulf's widow what happened. To this, Athelstan says, okay, but you're always welcome here. So Egil leaves with a ship of 100 men to return to Norway. But he does tell Athelstan that he would probably return sooner than later to collect on Athelstan's offer.
Okay. So he's willing to go back.
It sounds that way. Like I said, we're only halfway through it, so who knows? So Egil and his 100 men sailed to Fjordland, and upon his arrival found that Thorin the Herser had died, and his son Argiborn has succeeded in his father's title and become one of the king's men. So if you remember, Thorwulf, when he first went to Norway, was friends with Thorin the Herser. And then Argiborn was Thorin's son. And when Egil came, Egil became pretty good friends with Argiborn. So when Argiborn saw Egil return, he accepted them. He was very excited to see him. Here's his friend back from his travels. Sorry to hear about the brother dying. And invited him and 11 of his men to stay with him for the winter.
Yeah.
So Asgard, Thorin's widow, was staying with her kinsman Argiborn, along with Asgard's daughter Thordis. So Egil now breaks the news to Asgard of Thorwulf's death and offered to provide for her. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that means he wants to marry her or if he just says, I'll provide you money. I'm not sure what.
Okay.
The custom what that really means. So Asgard, as you would think, was upset about the news, but downplayed her grief and answered Egil fittingly. I'm not sure exactly what that means. So as time went by, Egil becomes more sullen. Argiborn assumes it is due to the death of Thorwulf, and he went to talk to Egil about it. Argiborn said he knew Egil had been writing verses and asked to hear some. So Argiborn's kind of trying to figure out what's got Egil.
Okay. Like why he's upset, not just that his brother has died?
Yeah, if there's more to it. And he actually finds out there is a little more to it. So Egil reads him a verse. The goddess of the arm where hawks perch, woman must suffer my rudeness. When young I would easily dare to lift the sheer cliffs of my brow. Now I must conceal in my cloak the outcrop between my brows. When she enters the poet's mind, headdress of the rock's giant earth. So the goddess of the arm is a woodman. Lift my brow, he doesn't want to look up. And the outcrop between your brow is your nose, right?
Okay.
And the beaded dress of the rock's giant earth is woman.
Okay.
So it could also be possibly a play on Asgard, which means God fence, but in its components can also be read as hill headdress. Okay? And then, so Argiborn says, so who is this woman? Argiborn hasn't quite figured it out yet. Then Egil spoke this verse. I seldom hide the name of my female relative in the drink of the giant's kin. Sorrow wanes in sea fire's fortress, and some stir the din of Valkyrie's armor, have poetic fingers that feel the essence of the god's wine. So, drink of the giant's kin is poetry. Sea fire gold, its fortress, is a woman. Valkyrie's armor is battle. War god is Odin. His wine is poetry. So, when he says the name of my female relative.
Oh.
So that leads us to believe, and we'll find out we are correct in this belief, that he has fallen in love, or deep like, I don't know, it's hard to say with Egil, with Asgard.
Gotcha. Okay. Which is a little weird, but okay.
Yeah. Argiborn felt that it would be a good match and said he would talk to her father on Egil's behalf. Egil had asked Asgard to marry him, but she deferred to her father and kinsman Argiborn. Egil and Argiborn went to Bjorn, and Egil asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. Born did not object, but deferred the decision to Argiborn, who was very supportive of the marriage. The marriage took place in Argiborn's house with a lavish feast to mark the occasion.
So we didn't really ask Asgard what she thinks.
Well,
I guess he did, and she was like, somebody else can decide for me.
Yeah, which I think was probably pretty customary at the time.
Yeah.
And I think, you need to ask my father. And then the father deferred to Arjborn, who he felt probably knew Egil better.
Mm.
But that may, some of this may be, I mean, it may have started before this, but this is kind of like, when you ask the father's permission to ask the daughter to marry you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So they had a lavish feast. They got married. And in the springtime, Egil prepared a merchant ship to sail to Iceland, as Arjborn did not feel it was safe for Egil to remain in Norway, as Gunhild was still king and ill-disposed to Egil.
Was still queen.
Yep, Gunhild was still queen, and she already didn't like Egil for a number of reasons, and he made it worse when Egil ran into her brother Braggart.
Yes.
Off of Jutland.
Yeah.
So that spring, Egil sailed to Iceland on a favorable wind. So he had been gone for 12 years.
Oh my God.
So
that is quite a long time to be out raiding.
Yeah, but what I should have read ahead and I would know this answer, and I mean, we'll answer it later. I don't know if he took Asgard and now his stepdaughter Thordis with him or not. I don't know if he left him in Norway. I mean,
you would think he would have brought him, but, maybe he wasn't sure if he was going to be in Iceland long, so we left them in Norway where they were comfortable already.
I don't know, but I mean, Thorwulf was gone probably the majority of the marriage. I think at the time, if they were raiders, they were home for winter and gone in the summer. And I think, the women of that time really ran the house, and ran the farms or whatever, they did a lot during the summer and early fall and spring, I'm sure. But
yeah.
So he arrived in Borg, and his father was very excited to see him, Skallgrim.
Yeah, after 12 years.
Yeah. And Thorfinn the Strong was with Egil, and they spent the winter with Skallgrim. Egil had enormous amount of wealth, from all his raiding that he'd done. He'd amassed a pretty big fortune.
Well, and he just got,
those two
chests of silver.
Yeah, but it's unknown whether the chest of silver that was intended for Skallgrim, it's unknown whether Egil ever gave it to him or not.
Oh, so he might just be keeping everything for himself.
Yeah, and it was I think Athelstan kind of thought that second chest of silver he might divide up with some of his men.
Okay, but he might have just kept all of it.
Yeah, we don't know if he did any of that stuff.
I feel like if he didn't divide it a bit among his men, they might have had an uprising against him.
Right, and they might not have been as loyal to him if he didn't do that. But anyway, so Thorfinn the Strong's there with him, and they're wintering with Skallgrim, and Skallgrim has a daughter, Sarum.
Which is Egil's sister.
It's Egil's sister. I don't know if it's a full sister or a half sister.
Okay.
But Thorfinn marries Skallgrim's daughter, Sarum.
Oh.
So Egil stays with Skallgrim for several winters and looks after the property and ran the farm just as much as Skallgrim did. And Egil started going balder than ever.
Okay, because Skallagrim, his father, was Baldgrim as well, right?
Correct. Well, that's what Skallgrim means, is Baldgrim.
Okay, yeah.
But, and I think what we'll see is, as he's in Iceland, I believe Egil's going to have some problems with things that he did in his youth, possibly, and some disputes over land and how his father gave it to people. I don't know if he honors it or if he doesn't. I don't know. It should be interesting to see where Egil goes from here, because I think we're going to have him in Iceland for at least an episode or two.
Okay.
I believe, I haven't,
Yeah.
it's been a while since I read it, but, we'll be refreshing the memory.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to Medieval Murder. If you have any listener questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please feel free to reach out via our Twitter account at Murder Medieval, our Instagram account at Medieval Murder, or via email at info.medievalmurder@gmail.com. And if any of you are interested in rocking some Medieval Murder merchandise or reading some of our book reviews and blog posts, take a look at our website, medievalmurder.org. Tune in later for our next podcast.